I love the objection theme in these games. Always gets me super pumped up whenever I hear it. Playing Phoenix Wright made me want to become a lawyer way back when. Objection! Until I grew up and realized that being a lawyer was more than just slamming tables, throwing coffee at people, and shouting objection. Welcome to day 3 of Z Memories with a much different title than what I usually cover. Not only is it all ages, but it's also on a Nintendo console rather than PC. As I'm sure I mentioned in Tsukihime, I'm a video game enthusiast before I'm a visual novel enthusiast, and while Tsukihime was the first PC visual novel I ever played, I'd say my first experience with the genre itself was Phoenix Wright. Way back when, I had the chance to try a GBA game known as Gyakutan Saiban, which was the Japanese title for Phoenix Wright, roughly translates to Turnabout Trials. Not so lucky for me, I couldn't read moon runes back then, so I fiddled around with it for an hour or two before just dropping it. Fast forward a few years and I hear that Gyakutan Saiban is being released in the US under the name Phoenix Wright. I was mildly interested in it at this point, but not really enough to pick it up. That all changed when I heard it was an enhanced remake. They added a bunch of stuff, even a whole new case to the original, which honestly didn't really mean jack to me considering I never actually played the game. What made me jump into Phoenix Wright, however, was the added functionality with the microphone on the DS, where during a witness testimony, you can scream into the microphone, "Objection!" And Phoenix Wright would then stand up and point his finger at the witness and shout, "Objection!" This was during the heyday of the DS release where Nintendo tried to milk every gimmick possible. I remember I was like, hot dang, a mechanic that actively encourages me to yell at people in the game and not just because I'm mad? That sounds fucking amazing! I mean, I of course found out later on that the game didn't actually register the word you said, but rather if you made a loud sound, it would trigger the objection. But to a younger version of me, this sounded like the coolest thing ever. The DS exclusive case also made you blow into the mic to dust evidence for fingerprints, which again I thought was like whoosh, whoosh. But really, this was just one of many gimmicks that the DS forced into every single game they had. I'll talk about Lunar Nights and Bulk Die one of these days, I swear. Anyways, yeah, I played Phoenix Wright Remake on the DS and it was dang amazing. Who knew Nintendo could take something as boring as working on a law case and turn into this high-octane finger-pointing action filled with people reacting to logical inconsistencies like they got hit by a truck. While there are a ton of spin-offs like Dai-Gyakutan Saiban, the Miles Edgeworth Investigations, and Phoenix Wright vs. Professor Layton, I'll mostly focus on the original trilogy. Phoenix Wright is essentially a visual novel and a point-and-click adventure game put together. Half the game is Phoenix Wright legally or illegally accessing crime scenes with a point-and-click interface as Mr. Wright snoops around gathering clues and talking with witnesses. Normally, you would imagine that all this legwork would be done by detectives and such, but since Mr. Wright seems to take on cases solely having done next to zero research and always at the last minute, we've gotta gather all the evidence ourselves. Doesn't help that Mr. Wright has next to no relation to the cops, or really anyone at all. The other half of the game is the court trial portion, where you cross-examine witnesses, pressing for more information on certain parts of the testimonies, then finally present evidence gathered both in and out of the court to crack the contradictions present. It is sort of a puzzle game, sort of a visual novel, both rather simple, but vastly entertaining to read. What Phoenix Wright excels in my opinion, is 3 things. First is the characters. The man himself, Phoenix Wright, is probably one of my favorite protagonists. He's a passionate but bumbling lawyer who takes on the hardest and most ridiculous cases against opponents entirely out of his league. Throughout all the evidence collection, Mr. Wright never fails to have a smart-ass comment to make, or to try and play the straight man against all the other colorful characters in the game. He shows up to all the court cases with basically a half-full deck, as he only had like one afternoon to collect all the evidence. He BS's his way through cross-examinations, like sometimes when you press an entirely innocuous statement, Phoenix Wright questions him like, even he absolutely has no idea why the heck he's asking. Yet despite all that, Phoenix Wright always manages to find evidence he needs, points out the true culprit of the crime, and prove his client innocent at the end of the day. He somehow is always the underdog even after winning seemingly impossible cases one by one. Underneath his sarcasm and inexperience lies a pure-hearted desire to protect the innocent and find the truth, and you can't really hate a guy like that. The other characters present in this series are also just great fun to be with. There is his assistant, Maya Fey, a spirit medium who could channel the spirit of her dead sister and Wright's mentor, Mia Fey, but more importantly, is an exceedingly cheerful glutton who lifts Wright out of his moments of desperation. Phoenix's rival, Miles Edgeworth, who used to be childhood friends with him, but has since become a cold-hearted prosecutor only seeking to win cases. Even the judge, who although never named in the entire series, is present in nearly every case Mr. Wright participates in, and is just the most lovable, innocent old man, who does his best to rightfully judge each case, even when he doesn't quite understand what is going on, with all the ghost possession, spirit channeling, talking to animals, and other such nonsense. This doesn't even include all the friends that appear time and time again, or the defendants and criminals of each separate case that, although they only tend to appear once, all have larger-than-life personalities in a way only Japan can do. My favorite part about these characters by far, however, is how they grow and develop with each new entry in the series. Phoenix Wright starts out as a fresh new lawyer in the first game, bumbling through case after case, but by the end of the original trilogy, is an accomplished professional seeking the truth. In fact, in the newest entry, Wright is now a mentor figure to the new main characters of the series, while simultaneously acting as one of the playable ones. Maya goes from a plucky, gluttonous assistant in the first game to a beautiful young adult tempered by a new position in the newest one, but in the end is still Maya deep down. Edgeworth starts out as a cold-hearted prosecutor in the first game, but by the end of the original trilogy is Phoenix Wright's staunch ally. While he's still the snarky perfectionist on the outside, he now dedicates his career to pursuing the truth rather than just trying to win every case by any means necessary. In the most modern installment of the franchise, he is now the chief prosecutor and works with Phoenix Wright to root out corruption from within the court. There are plenty of other characters I skipped, like the two new main characters, Apollo Justice and Athene Sykes, Wright's mentor and Maya's sister Mia Fey, their little cousin Pearl Fey, Detective Gumshoe, and so on, but I think you get my point. Watching the characters grow and change throughout a series isn't something you get to see very often in visual novels, due to most not actually having direct sequels. Second thing Phoenix Wright does great is localization, which isn't something I can usually praise. Phoenix Wright does an amazing job adapting what is an exceedingly Japanese game into something for the international audience to read. It's not 100% faithful to the source material, but the changes they made, I feel, capture a lot of the heart of the original script, are sometimes even funnier, and add their own charm to what is already an absurd story. There are some easy ones to point out: how the main characters go to visit the wonderful cherry blossoms of Washington DC, how Maya is a complete burger glutton as opposed to being a ramen glutton, and so on. The biggest change, and the one I'm most impressed with however, is the main character's name itself. Phoenix Wright's original Japanese name is Ryuichi Naruhodo. Ryuichi is simply formed from the words Ryu, Dragon, Ichi, One. I'm guessing because it's a cool name, dragons are cool. His last name, on the other hand, Naruhodo, is a direct reference to the phrase Naruhodo, which means something along the lines of, oh, now I understand, or now I get it. The original author used this to highlight Phoenix's inexperience, as it's the kind of line people use when someone is explaining something to them in a mystery novel. In contrast, his English name is composed of Phoenix, which, while also being a mythical creature like a dragon, fits more in line with how Phoenix Wright always seems to come back from every case, on the brink of failing, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. His last name Wright is also a great way to adapt the same pun like oh right, and it's just as easy for other characters to make fun of as well. Phoenix Wright's name, I think, is a great example for the rest of the localization, how it doesn't follow 100% the original, but adapts it while adding its own sense of character. Lastly, Phoenix Wright is just plain old fun, not only the humor aspect from the dialogue, but due to the presentation itself. How Phoenix Wright just slams the table and yells objection when questioning witnesses, how they react to every contradiction pointed out as if they just got shot, or how when you finally get them to admit their guilt, they all have the greatest freakouts, rivaling those of a JoJo villain. When Mr. Wright's on the ropes, you can see the sweat drops and his panicking that even the judge comments on it. When you present evidence to the court, a huge word bubble shouting, "Take that!" flashes onto the screen. Even the mannerisms and the unique points of all the new witnesses and prosecutors are just so dynamic and fun, like how Godot repeatedly throws coffee at Wright during the third game, or how the second game's main prosecutor, Franziska von Karma, brings a whip to the court case, not just to whip Wright, but also the witnesses and sometimes even the judge himself. Not a single witness in the game can be constituted as normal. They're all strange, crazy, and that just adds to the charm of the visual novel, known as Phoenix Wright. This is all wrapped up with great background music that changes depending on the state of the case. When Phoenix Wright is about to corner the true culprit, objection starts blasting and you truly get the feeling of, there's no way I'm letting this guy get away with this. I imagine most of you have played or at least heard of Phoenix Wright by this point. It is just shy of being nearly 20 years since it first came out, and Phoenix Wright certainly isn't an underground name. I mean, he was even a character in the fighting game Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, where he pointed Wolverine 6 feet underground, and Project Crosszone 2, a tactical SRPG. If you haven't given the series a play before for whatever reason, give it a shot. Not every single game on Z Memories are necessarily my favorites, but I still think that even now, over nearly 2 decades later from when it first came out, Phoenix Wright is still an incredibly fun visual novel, and now's as good a time as any to jump into it. They've recently released an HD collection of the original trilogy out on Steam last year, and like most fans of the series, I consider the original trilogy to be the best parts of the Phoenix Wright saga, as the first 3 games form a perfect arc for Phoenix Wright and all his companions before the decade time skip. Well, granted, it's more like the first game, Ace Attorney, is a great start, and the third game, Trials and Tribulations, is the best in the entire series, while the second game, Justice for All, just kinda exists. Give it a try if you haven't already. I think it's one nearly anyone can enjoy. Like if you enjoy the content, Twitter in the center of the end screen if you want to see what I'm up to in between videos, and subscribe if you haven't already to keep up to date when Day 4 of Z Memories comes out, where I'll be covering one from a developer famous for combining visual novels with top-down action mecha beat-em-ups. Sticking around? Here is Day 2 of Z Memories on top with Gaozu Island in case you missed it, and the bottom will be something you might find interesting. I'll see you next time.